Lucy? Oh, hi, Ethel. Hi, Lucy. What did the doctor say? Ethel, we're going to have a baby.
For 6 years, I Love Lucy dominated television. It won 5 Emmys and never dropped below 3rd place in ratings. Everything looked perfect on screen. But when fans today slow down certain scenes, they're finding things that don't match the story we've been told, things that were never supposed to be visible on 1950s televisions. Now people are asking uncomfortable questions about what really happened behind those studio doors. In 1950, only 4 million American homes had a television. That number had just quadrupled from the year before. The medium was brand new, but CBS already saw where things were heading. They were desperate to move Lucille Ball's hit radio show My Favorite Husband to TV. The show had been a huge success on the radio, with 124 episodes between 1948 and 1951. Ball played Liz Cuggett, later changed to Cooper, opposite Richard Denning. The story was based on a popular 1942 book Mr. and Mrs. Cuggett, The Record of a Happy Marriage, which had already been turned into a movie. CBS believed this domestic comedy, with Ball's perfect comedic timing, could shine on the small screen. But Lucille Ball threw a curveball. She said she'd only do the show if her real-life husband, Desis, played her on-screen husband too. CBS didn't like that idea one bit. They said the audience wouldn't believe a typical American woman would be married to a Latin man. They didn't care that Ball and Arnaz were already married in real life. They didn't care they'd met on a movie set back in 1940 and had been together ever since. All they saw was a Cuban accent and an unfamiliar face. They wanted Denning back, someone white, someone believable. Ball didn't budge. "We are married," she snapped. It wasn't just about casting. It was about fighting the ugly, silent rules that shaped American TV, rules that said interracial love didn't exist. So Ball and Arnaz took things into their own hands. They created Desilu Productions, a name that blended Desi and Lucy, just like their lives had. They hit the road in the summer of 1950 with a vaudeville act. They paid for it themselves and teamed up with General Amusement Corporation to help with the tour. Desi's band played music. Lucy did comedy sketches. The same writers who worked on the radio show, Jess Oppenheimer, Bob Carroll Jr., and Madeline Pugh, wrote new material for their act. These writers would later become the core team behind I Love Lucy. Their live shows were more like nightclub performances than traditional theater, but they worked. Crowds loved them. Critics raved. Ball's physical comedy stood out. Their chemistry was undeniable. By early 1951, CBS gave in. So did Philip Morris, the sponsor. They agreed to fund a full half-hour series. Ball and Arnaz had bigger goals than just being on TV. They wanted a show the whole family could watch together, something real, not another cookie-cutter 1950s sitcom where the husband was king and the wife stayed quiet. They wanted to show marriage as it really was, messy, funny, stubborn, and loving. The main character, Lucy Ricardo, wasn't content staying home. She kept trying to break into showbiz, usually failing in hilarious ways. But that ambition reflected Ball's own life. She didn't want to be stuck at home while Desi traveled. Their real marriage had already suffered from time apart. They brought that tension into the show but softened it with comedy. The characters fought, but they always made up. They never went to bed angry. That was one of Ball and Arnaz's real-life rules. Their show used laughter to tell the truth. On March 2, 1951, they shot the pilot episode at CBS's Columbia Square Studios. It was filmed using 3 RCA cameras and recorded on kinescope, a low-quality method at the time. But when they watched it back, Ball and Arnaz knew they had something special. The pilot already had all the ingredients: Lucy chasing stardom, Ricky trying to stop her, and the chaos in between. Some of the jokes ended up in later episodes, like The Audition, which aired as episode 6. Ralph Levy directed the pilot. He was already a TV pro, having worked with Jack Benny, George Burns, and Ed Wynn. The pilot sold the show. By October 1951, I Love Lucy premiered, but it almost didn't happen. Behind the scenes, casting was a battlefield. CBS didn't just want Denning, they begged Ball to keep things the same. They believed viewers wouldn't accept a mixed-race marriage on screen. The idea that Ball was actually married to a Cuban man in real life didn't matter to them. It just made things worse in their eyes. The executives said his accent was indecipherable. They said he was foreign. They were blind to the reality in front of them, a real marriage, real chemistry, and a show that could change everything. And then there was Vivian Vance. She wasn't supposed to be there either. She'd had a nervous breakdown in 1945 while performing the voice of the turtle. It put her Broadway career on pause. She took time off. She went to therapy. She slowly returned to acting, performing in small roles and eventually landing at the La Jolla Playhouse in California. She was back in the same play that once broke her. On July 28, 1951, she was performing a Saturday matinee when Desi Arnaz and Jess Oppenheimer came to see the show. They were scouting for someone to play Ethel Mertz. Vance wasn't auditioning, she was just doing her job. But that night, they offered her the role. No second takes. No screen test. Just raw talent and perfect timing. William Froley's story was just as unlikely. He was 64 and mostly forgotten. He'd been in more than 100 films but hadn't done anything big in years. His career started in 1914 with his wife in a vaudeville act. They divorced in 1927. By 1951, he was out of options. He picked up the phone and called Lucille Ball himself. He wanted to play Fred Mertz. CBS wasn't thrilled. Froley had a bad reputation. He drank too much. He was known to be unreliable. But Arnaz took a gamble. He warned Froley, "Show up late or drunk even once, and you're out." Froley agreed. And to everyone's surprise, he never showed up drunk. He learned his lines after one reading. Decades of stage work had trained him to be razor sharp. Then came the real test, the American audience. Would they accept a Cuban-American man as a romantic lead? Would they watch a show that quietly but clearly portrayed an interracial marriage? The answer came quickly. When I Love Lucy first aired on October 15, 1951, no one expected it to survive, let alone change television forever. At 9 p.m. on Mondays, it had to go head-to-head with Lights Out on NBC, a top 10 show adapted from a famous radio drama. Critics were blunt. They said Lucy had no chance. But within 7 months, everything flipped. By May 1952, 11 million American families were watching I Love Lucy every Monday night. That's nearly 3/4 of all TV-owning households in a country where only 15 million sets even existed. And on April 18, 1952, Nielsen declared it the #1 show in America. TV Guide called it the season's most popular program, smooth, deft, solidly produced, and funny. Not bad for a show that was supposed to fail. What set it apart wasn't just Lucy's comedy, it was how the show was made. Unlike others at the time, I Love Lucy was filmed on 35mm film with a live studio audience. That had never been done before. Most shows were broadcast live from New York and recorded using a blurry method called kinescope. But Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz said no to that. They stayed in Hollywood, used real film, and made sure every frame looked sharp. Of course, filming this way cost twice as much. CBS didn't want to pay, so Ball and Arnaz made a bold move. They took a $1,000 weekly pay cut. Their salary dropped from $5,000 to $4,000, but in exchange, they got ownership of the show through their company, Desilu Productions. CBS didn't think old episodes would ever matter, but Ball and Arnaz were playing the long game. Years later, they sold syndication rights for the first 180 episodes back to CBS for $5 million. That's around $19.5 million today. Their deal became a model for artists owning their work instead of handing it all to studios. And it got even more clever when Ball became pregnant during the second season. She needed time off after giving birth. Desi Arnaz had a problem: how to keep the show running? He came up with a simple but genius idea: why not air some of the already filmed episodes again? At that point, No one had ever rerun a TV show. But it worked. The public didn't mind. In fact, they loved it. The pregnancy storyline was such a hit that when the episode, Lucy Goes to the Hospital, aired on January 19, 1953, the same day Ball gave birth in real life, over 70% of American TVs were tuned in. That's roughly 44 million viewers. The rerun concept was born, and it later became a billion-dollar business. The show kept dominating. For 4 out of its 6 seasons, I Love Lucy was the most watched show in America. It peaked in the 1952. The 1953 season of I Love Lucy peaked with an astounding 67.3 rating, the highest ever for a single season of any TV show. The next year, it scored 58.8, and the year after that, 49.3. Even its final season in 1956 to 1957 reclaimed the number 1 spot with a 43.7 rating, reaching nearly 17 million homes. That kind of consistent dominance was unheard of. Throughout its entire run, the show never ranked below 3rd place. From the start, I Love Lucy found its audience. Its first season earned a 50.9 rating and pulled in 7.78 million households, ranking 3rd. Then it took over, claiming the number 1 spot for 3 years in a row. Even when it slipped to 2nd place in its 5th season, it still held a 46.1 rating. The numbers never dipped far because the fans never left. Awards followed the ratings. The show won 5 Emmy Awards. It was named Best Situation Comedy in both 1953 and 1954. In 1956, Lucille Ball herself was crowned Best Actress. Vivian Vance, who played Ethel, took home Best Supporting Actress in 1954. These wins proved the critics wrong and helped give television the respect it needed as a serious art form. But I Love Lucy didn't just fade after 1957. Its life continued far beyond its original 6 seasons. CBS offered the show for syndication in 1967, and it exploded again. By 2011, more than 40 million Americans were still watching the show every year. That's over 5 decades after its final episode. It aired in dozens of countries and dozens of languages. In 2013, a colorized version of the Christmas episode brought in 8 million viewers on primetime TV. In 2023, Pluto TV even launched a 24-hour I Love Lucy channel. When Lucille Ball got pregnant during the 2nd season of I Love Lucy, it almost destroyed the show. This wasn't just a personal moment for her, it became one of the most controversial events in television history. In 1952, American TV still followed strict censorship rules. You couldn't show anything that even hinted at sex, and pregnancy was completely off-limits. Sponsors and CBS executives were horrified. They told Desi Arnaz bluntly, "You cannot show a pregnant woman on television." The bio-advertising agency warned that admitting Lucille Ball was pregnant could kill the show entirely. Everyone feared the worst. The idea that a married woman might be expecting a child was seen as too scandalous for American families to see on screen. The panic was so intense that the word pregnant itself was banned from being spoken, not just avoided, banned. Instead, the writers had to use words like expecting with child and a blessed event. Even the episode title that announced Lucy's pregnancy, Lucy is enceinte, used the French word for pregnant to get around the English language ban. Another episode was titled Pregnant Women Are Unpredictable, but they didn't dare show that title on screen. CBS went so far as to censor a nightclub scene where Ricky announces the pregnancy by having him sing "Rockabye Baby" while calling it a blessed event. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, this level of censorship was deadly serious. This wasn't just about sponsors. It reflected a culture that didn't want to admit sex existed, even between married people. Things got so tense that CBS called in backup, not from the legal team, but from religion. They invited a Catholic priest, a Protestant minister, and a rabbi to review the scripts. They were hoping the clergy would either bless or block the storyline. Amazingly, all 3 religious leaders read the episodes and didn't ask for a single change. According to one of the show's writers, Meline Pugh, the religious review team said they didn't change a word. That approval helped calm the network's nerves. It was a strange moment in TV history. A sitcom about a goofy couple suddenly needed religious clearance just to mention that the wife was having a baby. Despite all the fear, the public couldn't get enough of it. By early 1953, Lucille Ball's real-life pregnancy had become national news. The entire country was following her condition like it was a royal event. CBS made a bold move. They scheduled the baby's birth episode to air on the exact day Ball was having her real cesarean section, Monday, January 19, 1953. That kind of media coordination was unheard of at the time, and it worked. That night's episode, Lucy Goes to the Hospital, shattered every existing television record. It was watched by over 44 million people. That's 71.7% of every TV in the United States. To put that in perspective, the very next day President Dwight D. Eisenhower was sworn into office. His inauguration only got 67.7% of viewers. More people tuned in to watch Lucy give birth than to witness a new president take power. That single episode proved something huge. Audiences were ready for more realistic, emotionally true stories. And it gave a giant middle finger to the outdated moral codes still haunting TV executives. But Lucille Ball's real risks didn't end with the pregnancy. 3 years later, she nearly died on camera. In 1956, the I Love Lucy episode Lucy's Italian movie featured what looked like a hilarious grape stomping scene. In it, Lucy jumps into a wine vat to learn how Italians make grapes into wine. What no one knew was that the danger was real, and it almost cost her life. Producers had searched the Napa Valley to find a real Italian grape stomper. They found Teresa Torelli D'Amico, who didn't speak much English. The translator gave her the basics, but there wasn't a way to explain everything in detail during the fast-paced filming. The producers added a last-minute idea, a mock fight inside the vat, to make the scene funnier. What they didn't plan for was that Teresa didn't understand it was pretend. During filming on March 8, 1956, the scene turned violent. Ball accidentally hit Torelli while moving around in the grapes. Torelli took it seriously and attacked. She pinned Ball down in the grape mush and began choking her. Lucille Ball's head was supposed to pop up from the grapes for a funny shot, but it never did. She was being held underwater in purple juice, gasping for air. She later said she had grapes in her ears, her nose, and even in her throat. She had to grab Teresa by the neck to break free. All of it happened in front of a live studio audience, and no one realized she was in real danger. They thought it was just another one of Lucy's hilarious physical comedy bits. Even the director, William Asher, didn't stop the scene. What ended up on television was only part of what really happened. They had to cut out most of the fight because it went on too long and too violently, but you can still see flashes of the panic in Ball's eyes. She had told the producers earlier she didn't want a fake little tug-of-war. She wanted the scene to feel real. Unfortunately, it felt too real. The prop team had already created special water-soluble makeup to protect Ball's skin from turning purple. What they hadn't planned for was near drowning. Ball later said, "To drown in a vat of grapes is not the way I had planned to go." That wasn't the only time she almost drowned on camera. Years later, while filming The Lucy Show, she slipped during a shower scene and nearly drowned again. She was saved by her co-star Vivian Vance. Lucille Ball's career was full of laughs, but behind the scenes it was filled with danger, stress, and real pain. They called it one of the funniest moments in television history, but behind the laughter in the handcuffs episode of I Love Lucy, something serious was happening. It aired on October 6, 1952, and millions of viewers saw Lucy and Ricky stuck together by accident. What they didn't see, what they weren't meant to see, were the hidden safety tricks that made the whole thing possible. For over 70 years, nobody noticed what was wrapped around Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's wrists. It wasn't part of the costume. It wasn't even meant to be seen. Underneath their sleeves, both stars were wearing ace bandages, skin-toned, medical grade, carefully hidden. These weren't just for comfort, they were protection. The handcuffs used in that episode weren't props from a costume shop. They were real, authentic Civil War-era restraints, around 90 years old at the time of filming, heavy, sharp-edged, and completely unforgiving. The old metal had hardened and rusted over the decades, leaving it with jagged edges that could cut skin during the show's wild physical scenes. That wasn't just a possibility, it was a real threat. Every time Lucy tugged or Ricky flailed, the cuffs dug in. The bandages acted like a barrier, absorbing the shock and guarding their wrists from bruises or blood. If you pause the episode today and look closely, you'll catch it, just barely. On Lucy's exposed wrist, the edges of the bandage peek through, one near her palm, the other farther up her arm. But back then, no one noticed a thing. That's because of Carl Freud. He was the show's cinematographer and the man behind the camera magic. Freud had already changed TV forever with his 3-camera system. But during this episode, his job wasn't just about capturing laughs. It was about hiding the danger. He used shadows, angles, and overhead lighting to make sure those bandages never stood out. His system allowed them to shoot full scenes without ever adjusting the lights. That meant no breaks, no distractions, and no clues. The cameras were placed just right to avoid close-ups that would reveal the bandages while still capturing all the slapstick chaos fans loved. And chaos it was. One of the wildest moments happens in the bedroom, where Lucy and Ricky try to sleep while stuck together. They roll, twist, and tangle in the sheets trying to make sense of their ridiculous situation. Without the bandages, that scene alone could have left them injured. And then there's the final act, the studio performance. Ricky's on stage and Lucy's hidden behind him, reaching her hand through his sleeve to pretend it's his. It's a famous gag, but it took perfect timing. Over and over, take after take, they had to do it again. More pressure, more twisting, more strain on their wrists. That's where those hidden raps made all the difference. This episode was rated 8.6 on IMDb for a reason. It delivered laughs, tension, and one unforgettable premise. But the real brilliance wasn't just in the jokes. It was in how carefully they protected the people behind them. They looked like the perfect couple on screen. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz made the world laugh with I Love Lucy. But behind those black and white smiles was a marriage full of rage, betrayal, and violence. According to those who worked closely with them, the tension wasn't just emotional, it turned physical. Crew member Maury Thompson remembered Lucille not only kicking Desi during arguments but laughing afterward. She didn't just aim for his backside. She aimed low, right between the legs. Sometimes she struck him hard enough to knock him over. Once she even hit him with a hammer and knocked him out cold. And in a moment of terrifying fury, she pointed a gun at Desi's head and pulled the trigger. Luckily, it was a novelty lighter that just sparked a tiny flame. But still, imagine the horror of that moment. All of this chaos happened while the cameras were rolling on one of America's most beloved sitcoms. And the show itself, it was never just about laughs. Lucille Ball didn't just want to work with her husband, she needed to. Their marriage was falling apart before the show even began. Desi was cheating. They had already separated once. So when CBS originally cast I Love Lucy, Lucille insisted Desi be cast as her on-screen husband too. She thought keeping him home would stop him from sleeping around. But not everyone believed it was a good idea. One writer bluntly asked, "Why do we want a Latin band leader who can't even speak English?" Still, Lucille fought for him. She was desperate. She believed that working together would save their marriage. But it didn't. The show was a massive hit. Their relationship was not. They finally divorced in 1960. Desi's affairs weren't just rumors. They were well known in Hollywood. According to multiple biographers, he had a thing for prostitutes and saw nothing wrong with cheating. That mindset, it turns out, was passed down through generations. His father and grandfather both kept mistresses. Desi was raised to believe that men could do as they pleased, but women had to stay loyal. Lucille hated it. She tried to ignore it, but the pain was obvious. She once admitted, "I closed my eyes, put blinders on, and ignored what was too painful to think about. When a tabloid printed a story about Desis womanizing, she didn't even flinch. "Oh hell," she said. "I could tell them worse than that." It was that bad. Even during the show's busiest days, Desi would finish 14-hour shoots and still manage to sneak away for weekend boat trips with whatever hot tamale he fancied that week. Things weren't any easier with the rest of the cast. Vivian Vance and William Froley played the lovable Ethel and Fred Mertz. But in real life, they despised each other. When filming started, Vivian was 42. Froley was 64. She hated the age gap. She called him an old coot and didn't hide her disgust. He fired back with venom. He'd suggest cruel lines that made fun of her body, calling her a sack full of doorknobs. The feud got so bad that when CBS offered them a spin-off show called Fred and Ethel, Vivian refused, even when offered a $50,000 bonus. Their hatred ran deep. When Froley died of a heart attack in 1966, Vivian reportedly stood up in a restaurant and shouted, "Champagne for everybody." Though later she softened, saying, "There's a great big amusing light gone out of this world." Even behind the camera things weren't smooth. Director William Asher's very first day on set ended in disaster. He left briefly, came back, and found Lucille giving orders to the crew. He pulled her aside and told her plainly, "There's only one director. If you want to do it yourself, don't pay me and send me home." She burst into tears and ran off the stage. Desi, furious, rushed in to defend his wife but eventually calmed down. Still, the tension lingered. Vivian Vance later revealed she suffered a full-on nervous breakdown while filming. In a 1955 magazine interview, she said the pressure to be funny, perfect, and lovable every week nearly broke her. And her feud with Froley only made it worse. After I Love Lucy ended, he would sneak onto the set of The Lucy Show, drop film canisters on purpose, and ruin her scenes just to torment her. Despite the chaos, I Love Lucy didn't just survive, it became legendary. In 2012, over 60 years after its debut, it was voted the greatest TV show of all time by ABC News and People magazine, beating out titans like Seinfeld, MASH*, and Cheers. In 1991, it was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame. Even now, its influence hasn't faded. That's because I Love Lucy changed television forever. Lucille and Desi, through their company Desilu Productions, created a new kind of sitcom. They were the first to use a 3-camera setup and a live audience on film. CBS was nervous about the cost, but filming on 35mm meant the show could be rerun in high quality forever. Their methods became the industry standard. Even the comedy structure, slapstick mixed with real-life struggles, became the blueprint for sitcoms that followed. One iconic episode, Job Switching, showed Lucy and Ethel falling apart on a chocolate factory assembly line. It was funny because it was real. Millions of workers could relate, and millions laughed. Lucille Ball wasn't just a comedy star. She broke barriers no woman before her ever had. In a time when women were expected to smile, stay quiet, and look pretty, she became the first female head of a major production studio. After divorcing Desi, she ran Desilu alone. She didn't just act, she owned the business, and she mentored other women too. Her mix of slapstick and femininity paved the way for female comics like Tina Fey and Amy Schumer. She proved that women could be hilarious, powerful, and in control all at once.